Hi, everyone. Lovely to see you all here today. Welcome to Breaking Down the Top 30 US Universities by Noah McCarthy, one of my most experienced strategists, head of strategists here at Crimson. So while we wait for you to file in, I just want to set down some housekeeping rules. We have a panel at the bottom of your screens right now. If you have any questions about this presentation, and what Noah is speaking about in terms of the presentation that you see, please pop your questions into the Q&A section. Don't pop your questions in the chat area, as we may well miss them. I will be having some friendly banter in the chat area. If you have any questions in relation to how the webinar is running, or in relation to obtaining a consultation or anything like that, please pop it into the chat section. Right now, I'm going to launch a poll just so we can find out where you are from, just so we can tailor the webinar to you. So I'm just going to pop that in. It's a tell us about yourself poll. And we'll just start moving through the webinar now. So our mission at Crimson Education is to empower Australian students to access world-class education and to really just raise your expectations and potential higher. I don't believe that there should be a lid on any of you. I think that our ultimate responsibility is to see you succeed and really reach for high-ranking university admissions. We believe in the life-changing impact of education because every year we're very fortunate to be able to see that impact in real action in terms of the admissions numbers that we see coming to us. Both Noah and myself every year work with dozens of students on these trajectories. So these are our results. You can see these are the strongest. So we are now officially the world's #1 admissions company. You can see some of these are really, really high. Like you look at places like LSE, Edinburgh, Stanford, Columbia, incredible. All in all, we have helped 1,340 students achieve offers into the Ivy League, and we've had over 8,000 offers into the US top 50 and over almost close to 4,000 offers to the top 10 UK Russell Group universities as well. So I'm so excited to introduce you to Noah. Noah has graduated from the University of Michigan with a double major in history and international studies. He is actually head of our ANZ strategy team, I think Asia as well. After his studies, he began teaching and mentoring students in Hong Kong and Shanghai, and has extraordinary experience of working one-on-one and also in wider teams to help students gain admission into some very high-ranking universities. His students have gained admission into Princeton, Yale, Penn, Columbia, Brown, Stanford, just to name a few. So what we'll cover today, US versus Australian universities, comparing the top 10, 20 and 30 colleges, navigating the top 30, and we're going to share a couple of student case studies before moving on to the Q&A section. So now I'm going to hand it over to Noah, and I hope you very much enjoy and find today extremely informative. I will speak to you at the end of the webinar. Oh, actually through the webinar for the Australian universities, forgive me, and then at the end of the webinar. See you all in a moment.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Kiri. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. It's a somewhat more intimate group today. I see we've got 21 lovely attendees here, and we'll soon find out where everyone is at. But good morning, or not good morning, but good evening down under. And happy to talk a little bit myself as well. So as Curie noted, I am originally from America. My mom is from New York. My dad is from Boston. They actually had me in Ann Arbor, Michigan. They were graduate students at the University of Michigan where they did their PhDs. And so I grew up on campus, literally on campus for this like area for family of PhDs and doctoral students. Then they made a deal with the university. So I stayed there for 20 years. So I grew up literally on college campuses. I have worked with students who have gotten into every single Ivy League school. And I was able to visit New Zealand a bit earlier today, this year, and really appreciated understanding a little bit more of the on-ground experience and contrasting that with some of the experiences in other regions that are interested in US admissions. I was just in Seoul, South Korea for a couple of weeks through November. I'm currently speaking to you from Taipei, Taiwan. So I understand that in Australia, it's all a bit distant, right? You're distant from everyone and everything at some level. And you're many thousands of miles away from the US university context. So hopefully today can break down that a little bit and make that feel a little less abstract and get into some of those questions that anyone might have. And so perhaps we'll start then with thinking about how it looks where you're at, a much more familiar context, Australian universities and how they compare with US universities. So got some facts here. Curie, if you want to kind of guide us through the Australian side of things.
Absolutely. So in Australia, our average degree length is between 3 and 5 years. That very much depends on the area or the specialization that you're looking to go into. For instance, med is obviously going to take longer. Most med degrees are 6 or 7 years. The fastest is 5, but even then I'd say 6. Undergrad, you're more going straight into your degree as opposed to selecting your major as you would in the US. The subject requirements for entry, I would say some of them are preferred. It depends on which areas you're going into. The vast majority, not so much. Student to staff ratio is a lot higher in Australia. So we have some quite big tutorials. I wouldn't call them tutorials actually. When we think about the tutorial system in the UK or the US, it's a lot more one-on-one type targeted tutorials. We have quite large kind of classes. Number of applications, you have 5 per state. So, and Australia being a big country with many states, well, not as many as the US, but still we have a flexibility with regards to how you can apply.
Awesome. Thank you. We'll come back to some of those points when we discuss the US in depth. And then thinking about requirements. Curie, if you want to take it here.
Yeah. So while Australian universities are easier to apply than top US universities are competitive for a reason. And I might let Noah take that piece.
Oh, yes, sure. So, I mean, I think when it comes to the requirements piece as well, we spoke on it a little bit in the last slide, but there are technically no requirements for US universities when it comes to like you have to have a certain grade level or you won't be able to be considered, right? You can fail all your classes and apply to Harvard and they're forced to consider you. They have to take a look at your application. They have to consider your application. And it's worth noting that that actually is different from the UK as well, where if you're looking to apply to, say, Oxford or Cambridge, they'll tell you straight up, don't bother applying. In fact, we won't actually consider your application if you don't have a certain grade point average, a certain number of A levels or a certain IB score, etc. That being said, the name of the game there is holistic for US university. So just because technically they won't deny you the chance to send them an application fee and be added to the denominator of their applicants, which makes them look even more selective, right? They'll not really be very inclined to accept you if they don't have a very clear sense of your overall story, which starts from grade 9, both on the academic front, so your grades from grade 9 through grade 12 will be considered, as well as so many other fronts that we just don't see on the Australian university pathway. That's extracurricular, that's personal, that's in your essays, interviews, etc., which we'll get into quite shortly. And then, Kiri, some of the Australian side here.
So, Australian universities are looking for students who have done well academically. We're looking for characteristics that are not considered when applying for medicine or the performing arts. So entirely, they don't even look at it. It's literally a number. It's 100% your score that you're going to get in your ATAR. There is no interview other than for medicine for mostly almost all the Australian options. You are applying through your different state sites for your desired university course, and then automatically it creates a profile. You go through, and that's it. That's pretty much it. It's a very straightforward process. So, academics for Australia, as you can see, these are for various courses. There are some exceptions to this, but this is the ATARs we're looking at. So, you're looking for roughly around an 80 to an 85. Obviously, for your more competitive courses like medicine, law, selective engineering, and some more highly ranked business or degrees, or some of the more exclusive courses at like UniMelb or ANU, you are looking around 90, but for med, it's 99. You all know that, I'm sure. But the acceptance rates at some of these is higher. And look, Monash 70%, Adelaide 70%. Some are very low. So Sydney, New South Wales, Melbourne's still high, massive. ANU not as high, but not as competitive as the US universities.
Indeed. And when we're talking about competitive, we're talking about a few things here. So we've got on the slide an impactful intellectual. And when we're thinking about the holistic word that I mentioned a couple of slides ago, there are a lot of shapes to that rounded applicant that they're looking to see. That entails leadership with impact, which we'll talk about. That entails initiative, it entails creativity, it entails intelligence, certainly. Perhaps a different type of intelligence than UK universities or Australian universities might be looking for instance. Basically, they're looking for awesome people. And there are definitely like ways that we can kind of think about that cynically, right? They're looking for awesome people who will then go on to do awesome things, who will then go on to create this positive feedback loop where people want to go to Harvard because it's got this great reputation, because people who have gone to Harvard have gone on to do awesome things. But they're also looking for people who are going to contribute to their campus community, their campus culture. The campus community and the campus culture matters much more so for American universities than for Australian universities, and indeed for UK universities. And we'll get into a little bit how that looks, but they're really looking for people who are going to be a net positive on their campus. And so in that context, we could break it down more or less as such for what that looks like for you. The academics are still the biggest piece. You can say it's not as dominant a proportion as it would be for certainly Australian universities, as well as UK universities and most other universities, really all other university systems in the world, but it is still the number one factor. And the reason for that is that we're going to talk a lot about rankings today. When we're thinking about rankings, one of the biggest factors that goes into how those rankings are determined is the graduation rates of these universities. And if they don't feel like you're academically ready to handle the rigor of their university, they're going to get very scared. And so a lot of what we're doing with the academics is really just trying to give them that confidence that you're going to be able to handle it. And the best predictor of how well you'll do in university level coursework is, of course, your own high school level coursework. And of course, there are certain courseworks that are more universal, more recognized, they've had more precedent as admissions officers. That would include A-levels, IB, but ATAR as well. They'll have someone who has read for Australian kids in the past and who will be well familiar with ATAR, but they'll want to get that clearer sense, perhaps something that a counselor at an Australian school will be less familiar with presenting in a flattering manner. So that's a lot of the work that we do at Crimson as well, is how to make the academic piece kind of come through to these admissions officers who are just looking for that confidence in their academic readiness. The SAT, the ACT is another metric. It's another factor that we can use to determine that academic readiness as well. But beyond academics, there is so much more that goes into this awesome person thing I described. Extracurriculars, leadership, innovation. The way that it'll actually look is, well, there will be a portal called the Common App. If anyone has heard of the Common App before, where you'll have 10 slots to post all the extracurricular activities, leadership roles, etc., that you've done from 9th grade until 12th grade. You'll also have 5 honors or awards that you can post there. And they really want you to get to 10. It's not a good look if you don't make it to 10. And it's also not a great look if you just do everything like in the final year of your high school career, right? There's a term for, because they're called juniors, 11th graders in America. There's a term among admissions officers, junior joiners. You don't want to be a junior joiner who is just kind of like faking things and just doing things last minute because you've just decided, oh, I should get involved. Oh, I should get some kind of leadership role. You want something that shows a story, a thread as well. Oh, we've got musical theater in the chat. Lovely. We'll get into some of those specializations as well. But musical theater, you know, even if it's not necessarily like what you're going to go to school for, you know, there are music schools, there are theater programs, etc. That's something that I think would want to see throughout your high school time. You know, if you've got something that you can say on your activities list you've done for grade 9, grade 10, grade 11, and grade 12, that's going to show that dedication and not that junior joinerdom. And then the Common App essay, supplemental essays, the interviews, these are another really important way to round out the edges of a holistic profile. And the essay part there, having just done some events in Korea and having just kind of been really immersed in the Korean market for a little bit, I will say this matters a lot. And the more you can be like yourself, which I found Australians to be pretty good at being, right? The better, right? So in Korea, this is not to throw Koreans under the bus, but they're much more accustomed to the rat race that it can become of really competitive US universities and people doing everything they can to get an advantage, numbers wise, otherwise, there. And so there are tons of SAT prep courses, after school programs, etc., to get people the numbers, to get people the SAT practice, to get people the tutoring, to get people the competitions that they feel will help them stand out. But they're not really good at like kind of telling their own story in a way that is so genuine, is so cohesive, is so real feeling. And I would say lean into that. Aussies, lean into your time in the outback, lean into your time doing, I don't know, work at a supermarket or something, because that'll help you stand out in a sea of people who are just talking about, oh, here's a story about how I didn't think I was good enough at this competition, but then I really won everything and I'm so good. I'm so awesome. It's not a place to humble brag. It's a place to really show some side of you that's a bit different than what we can see in the numbers. And so lean into that side of things. The supplemental essays, the recommendation letters, the interview with alumni, all those things really do matter as well in the context of convincing the school that you're going to be a fit for their campus as well, right? So not just being an awesome person who will go on to do awesome things and make them a lot of money with your alumni donations and all that kind of thing as well, but also someone who will really fit the ethos, fit the vibe of their school. We'll talk about that a little bit more as well, but that's actually crucial, not just for the top 30, top 50 universities, but even the top 10 universities. If you don't understand the difference between a Penn and a Princeton, and it's easy for some people who are just concerned about ranking to not understand the differences. Oh, they're all Ivies. I want to go to any of the Ivies. These schools can be so picky. They can afford to be picky. They'll not accept you if you're just interested in an Ivy because it's an Ivy. You have to, through the supplemental essays and the interviews, etc., be very, very specific in why you want to go to that particular Ivy, as well as all the schools down your list. Awesome. So let's move on then to some of those schools down the list. We've got the top ones here, pretty much. And we've got, I think, a kind of approximate IB score that would be something we want to see to consider applying to these schools, to have a shot at these schools. You'll see it's quite high on the ATAR front and the IB front for these schools, because these are the top schools. And you'll see the acceptance rates on the side are also, what, like 10 times more selective than most of the, or at least numbers that we were seeing for Australian universities. Now, there are other metrics that go into this. Unfortunately, when it comes to rankings, when it comes to the numbers, the acceptance rates, et cetera, it's not as linear as we would appreciate. Like there's not one list that shows, oh, all the schools are correlated as far as the average SAT, as far as the average intelligence of the students, as far as the acceptance rate and the ranking and the subject ranking. There are many moving parts there. And so Crimson can kind of help you move through those nuances. But this is a good way to start. We're thinking about the foundation of academic readiness for IB and for ATAR. Cool. Now, thinking about that with some of our Crimson 2025 Australian IB Plus admit examples, we can see that the average SAT was quite high. And we're also kind of diving into some of the, as we do every year, most immediate data about, say, questions that are very top of mind to us at Crimson, like the advantage of sending a SAT or ACT. Now, that's a question I think a lot of parents have. And it's a question I think a lot of Australian parents have because they're like, oh, do I want to think about the SAT? Do I have to think about the SAT? What if my kid hasn't been going to an SAT prep course since they were 8 years old, as I've seen so many times in my tour of Korea? And perhaps they don't feel like an SAT is as good a fit for them. Maybe an ACT would make more sense, or maybe they don't want to submit at all. Is that okay? Well, we're finding that the IB admits did tend to submit their SATs because it's another metric that is another tool that these admissions officers can use to feel confident, to get them, to throw them a lifeboat, basically, to feel like they won't be taking too much of a chance in accepting you. But if you've got, say, an IB or an A-level curriculum that's a bit more standardized, a bit more appreciated by these admissions officers, and you've done well there, and your SAT is just not making it up there to that kind of level, it's a bit of apples and oranges, but like relatively not contributing too much to your application given your existing academics, then it's totally not necessary at many schools, although a lot of schools are requiring the SAT more than more often than not, they're still not requiring it, it's still test optional. So stuff to chew on. We see again that the average foundational numbers here are quite high. And this is very important. It's not everything. And I can actually tell you some stories of students who I've worked with who I had a student who got into Princeton with a 1440 SAT. I had a student who got into Yale with a 1470 SAT. Now, that's not ideal, certainly. But these kinds of things can happen in the US within reason. I have never had a student get in with, say, a 1050 to an Ivy League university. But what we do see in common among these top IB admits is not just, oh, they had great numbers. It's more than that. I mean, think of the thousands of high schools in one country alone, right? All of those high schools have a valedictorian. All those high schools have someone who's at the top of their class. And there's just not nearly enough slots if they wanted to go to an Ivy League university to accept them. So that's sort of the starting point, is that you've got the numbers to make them feel confident one way or another at an Ivy League university. But if you're going to get beyond that, you're going to really have to stick out and you have to be an awesome person. And there are a few ways under the hood of what makes an awesome person to begin. The most important one is to have a story, or what we see here, a clear direction, a defined lane. So you want a major in mind, but you don't have to commit to a major. That's important to remember. So the major that you put down when you're applying to these universities, you might have a first choice major, a second choice major, you might be asked to have a minor, is something that's going to be considered, but it's not a commitment. You're not going to be held to that major. In fact, in the US system, it's only after your second year that your academic counselor will say, hey, it's time to declare a major. I remember this happening to me. They're like, hey, do you want to do a major? What do you want to major in? I was like, history. And then they're like, oh, well, you've done all these other courses. You're basically almost fulfilling international relations major as well. Do you want a double major? And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll take another couple of courses. But that was only halfway through. So when you get in there, you can be like, okay, I want to take this course. I want to take that course. You just, it's kind of like high school, you know? And so what we're wanting to do with majors then is really just tell the most compelling story that will give you the best chance of getting in. generally speaking, getting your foot into the best university possible. And so starting with a major is great, but what you want to do that's better is think about an interest within a major. Oh, I'm not just doing political science, I'm thinking about women in political science. And that's something that I'm doing in research, that's something I'm doing in my campaign work, my extracurriculars, etc. But it shows that you're more mature. It shows that you've already got the kind of thing that a US university wants to see, which is that kind of like professional consideration, what your thesis would be, what your point would be. And then the best students don't just have an interest within a major, but they have a combination of majors, perhaps. Maybe they have a question that naturally bridges majors. I had a student who was interested in human emotion and how that kind of connected biology and psychology as well. And the question itself was interesting enough that it didn't so much matter that he didn't have such an obvious major, because that's somewhat flexible once you get into these universities as well. So you want that to be clear, and you want that to be consistent across the years that you've got. So that's why the earlier you start, the better, although there's a lot of massaging that can be done in your final year, even through the essays and such, to kind of explain how things kind of come together. We're also thinking about depth over breadth, proof and scale. There's a lot of ways to audit, one might say, your application. So something I know Jamie talks about a lot, Jamie, our CEO and co-founder, is recommendation letters as an audit for your extracurriculars. Because if you can imagine, now that I've told you about these rat race SAT cram schools throughout Asia, and the fact that this is a big industry, there's a lot of people who are really looking for every advantage to go to these schools because of the opportunities that these schools unlock and the sort of payout on the other side that they get after many years of paying for the best tutors and the best kind of competition support and all of that. But because of that, admissions officers have to assume that people will be exaggerating, that they might say that they've got more people in their club than they actually have. There's only so much that can be proved, right? And so that's why the more that you can do things that just actually make intuitive sense, the better. There are so many people who are founders of everything. That's great. But if you can actually like demonstrate through pictures, media, corroborated recommendation letters from an outside adult or a teacher or a counselor at your school, the extracurriculars that you're doing, that makes so much difference for these admissions officers, more and more so. And quantified outcomes are obviously amazing. I think you want some kind of combination of like institutional leadership, an existing organization that you've sort of risen the ranks through, as well as innovative leadership, something that you've sort of done as a capstone project. We have a lot of support at Crimson for capstone mentorship, something that, again, to the next point, really exemplifies, showcases your niche and your passion for something that makes sense for you to be passionate about. Not just like, oh, I wrote an Instagram page about gender inequality and I wrote facts about gender inequality. It's like, there are already Instagram pages with many, many, many more followers than you're going to have that are talking about those things. So it just looks like you're doing it for college. And the more that it looks like you're just doing things for college, the more no one will want you. It's like, kind of counterintuitive there. And then the AU context, global translation. So I mentioned how your counselors in Australian high schools will not have this experience. They won't know how to present you. They won't know how to present you flatteringly. We're going to, at Crimson, make sure that you are coming off exactly in the terms that admissions officers understand and appreciate. It's also helpful, I think, to lean into the fact that admissions officers will see you as a bit of a novelty. They've got tons of applicants with really high numbers coming from China, coming from India, coming from California, coming from New York. But if they're thinking about an Australian, they want someone who's going to be an Australian. They want someone who's going to be kind of funky, maybe a bit more outgoing, sporty. I mean, something. You do want to like stand out a little bit from the global competition and from your peers in Australia as well. So if every Australian all does Duke of Ed and nothing else, and they kind of have the same activities, then you should zig while they zag. Just find ways to stand out globally and locally in a way that feels cohesive, in a way that feels compelling and genuine. Right. So now let's think more on the colleges side. That's you and how you can maximize your chances. Now, where do you want to maximize your chances to get into? Top 30, top 20 universities here. Maybe one note on these, because these are pulled from, I understand that the THE, Times Higher Education, rankings list. We'll talk a little bit more about rankings, but that's why you're going to see some kind of funky names next to each other. Like, has anyone heard of UC Davis? Probably. But has anyone heard of Brown? Probably more people than have heard of UC Davis. But these are bunched together, not because we're trying to make a point, but because actually these are right next to each other, literally right next to each other on the Times Higher Education 2026 ranking. And that's because rankings are not, like I said, linear. They're all measuring different things and they all have different purposes. Some are better than others, frankly, and some are respected more in the US than others. The Times Higher Education is just one example, but we'll talk about some others as well. But generally speaking, in this kind of zone, maybe top 20, top 30, top 40, you're probably going to see more of these schools that are probably really high ranked for certain fields, like UIUC or UC San Diego, or even U Washington, or even it's not on here, but U Washington Seattle, not just Washington St. Louis. Some of those schools are actually ahead of Harvard in rankings such as engineering, in rankings such as computer science. So if you look up US News World Report, best undergraduate college computer science universities, you'll see Harvard's on there. There are a lot of Ivy Leagues on there. They're just under a school like University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, UIUC. So nationally, these are definitely going to be in that 20 to 30 zone more so, or even higher or lower, depending on how you think about it. But for field-specific rankings, they'll be actually, for good reason, ranked above Ivy League universities. But that means that they can be more accessible, of course, depending on what major you go into as well. And then sometimes they'll be a bit flexible. Say you want to consider a place that has a really good computer science or engineering program. You maybe come in as like a statistics major. Sometimes you can have some flexibility and then transfer it over to an engineering program that's ranked higher than Harvard's. So you'll see some terminology here as well about public versus private universities, the ones that I mentioned there that have generally higher ranked engineering programs like UT Austin, U Illinois Urbana-Champaign, the UCs. Those will be public research institutions, which will often have more facilities, more resources, kind of better tech support, even if they're generally a bit like less selective overall. They've got lower or higher acceptance rates. Cool. So then thinking about the top 10 to top 20 colleges, which is a flawed metric, right? Because top 20, according to whom, we see here schools that you're probably even a bit more familiar with, like NYU, some private universities as well as those more techy universities. Some even have tech in the name, like Georgia Tech, which are again going to be really up there for something like engineering or for computer science. And you'll see here that some of them, I can speak very well to University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, of course, have other strengths that come with being a public university. Often that comes with their scale. So I've spent a lot of time on campus at Princeton. I did something called the Princeton in Asia Fellowship. I have a lot of friends and mentors who are at Princeton, and I'm very familiar with that alumni network. And it's a great alumni network, right? Princeton, right? The name rings bells wherever you go. There's a different vibe to that alumni network than the University of Michigan alumni network. Princeton, it's like, if you know someone, and then that person knows someone, and you can kind of speak the language. Oh, you went to the Bent Spoon, like on Princeton's campus. You're familiar with this fellowship. Oh. That's very fun. University of Michigan, it's the biggest alumni network. It's everywhere you go, you'll see a University of Michigan Block M somewhere. You can talk to someone who remembers watching the football team years ago. Yeah, you can, for instance, Larry Ellison, one of the richest men in the world, top 5, I think, top 3 richest men in the world. His younger wife went to University of Michigan and loved it so much, loved the football, the American football experience there, that she caught his ear and he like donated like some ridiculous sum of money for Michigan to make sure that they could secure a really good American football player. So now we have this great American football quarterback, thanks to someone who has that pride because of the experience on campus that an American university, a public American university like Michigan has that will open doors for you everywhere you go in life if you're kind of just spirited and interested in connecting with tons of people all over the world who share that spirit for that undergraduate experience that they shared. Of course, you're going to have a lot more research focus as well at some of those like bigger universities, more techy universities. Then when it comes to the top 10, these are schools that we've all heard of, I assume, for the most part. These are schools that are heuristics, right? Princeton is on there, as I mentioned. The name rings bells. And if you have Princeton on your resume, recruiters, especially recruiters for certain types of jobs, you know, the top 5 accounting firms, law firms, etc., they're just not going to, they're strapped for time. They're not going to mess around as much with people who have, you know, degrees from schools in other countries or degrees from schools that they've never heard of, right? And it's just a time saver for them. If you've got a degree from these schools, you'll genuinely have doors open up that just wouldn't open up before. You've still got to be good. You know, they're not just going to keep you around if you're not good, but you'll get that chance because of the name. That's a big part of the appeal of the top 10 universities when we're thinking about these 10. And these 10 are going to be top 10, really, regardless of the kinds of lists that we're looking at. These schools will ring bells. And so you're going to have usually that combination of like the scale that I mentioned with Michigan and the kind of intimate person-to-person network that you'll get with someplace like Princeton. Now, there are other things to consider as well. Financial aid. So financial aid is going to be incredibly generous for the top schools for the most part, right? So Princeton, as I mentioned, Harvard, MIT, a lot of these schools, Yale, will offer 100% of demonstrated need met to international students, and they will be 100% need blind, which means that they will not consider the amount of need that you have, financial need that you have, when deciding whether or not to accept you. Now, a lot of other schools will not be need blind, and so that's something that you'd have to consider in your calculations. So it becomes kind of a very strategic thing to craft a school list that will make the most financial sense for you, as well as strategic sense for you. But the top end of schools will be much more strategic financially because they'll be much more generous because they've got billions and billions of dollars that are sloshing around. And, you know, global reach, undergraduate research, resources, all of that, of course, in spades. So I promised we'd talk a little bit more about getting under the hood and thinking about what this means when we're thinking about rankings. Because it's easy to talk about rankings. We could ask even, do rankings matter? Do rankings matter? Well, if everyone else seems to think that they matter, then they kind of have to matter a little bit, at least, right? Just insofar as everyone else seems to think it matters, so that gives them some certain power, right? Now, how much everyone thinks they matter will vary, of course, depending on where you are and what you want to do and, you know, what kind of path makes the most sense for you, of course. But there are more interesting questions, I think, than do rankings matter? Like, which rankings and who's doing the rankings and what are we ranking, you know? So this is one starting point, the Times Higher Education World Rankings, which has got Oxford, MIT, Harvard, Princeton, Cambridge, Stanford, Caltech, the usual suspects. You'll also find some anomalies, like UC Davis and Brown being neck and neck. You'll also see, I think, this is from the US perspective as well, some surprises in rankings that may be more familiar or maybe also familiar to you in Australia. Don't all raise your hands at once, but who here has heard of the QS Global Rankings, QS World Rankings? Yeah, they're big. They're big in, yeah, Kira's heard of them. They're big in Australia, certainly. They're not big in the US. They're really not. Kira, you've.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
No, not really. Yeah, it's
Interesting.
more of a global thing. I think it's more of a global thing because it's a bit more flattering to certain areas. But it's almost a bit unfortunate that I think it is particularly well known in Australia. And that's because I think it's quite flawed. I mean, just don't take my word for it. Go to the Wikipedia page for QS World Rankings and look at how they calculate it and controversy section. There are a lot of things wrong with it. Now, there are a lot of things wrong with most rankings, right? It's a flawed system. how they come up with these things. But you got to start somewhere. And I think you want a system that passes the smell test, right? And there are things about the QS World Ranking that just don't pass the smell test. For example, they've got Dartmouth, Ivy League University, sub 4% acceptance rate at 237 on the QS World Rankings. And so that's actually lower than a university in Kazakhstan, for example. And nothing against Kazakhstan, but which parents here would really rather their kid go to this Kazakh university versus an Ivy League university? Probably not many, but a lot of parents are using that same list just a bit further up to make considerations about different schools. So rankings are all flawed. I think the QS is particularly flawed. And so you really want to dive into the nuances there and get a range of sources. So the one that we've kind of focused on here is Times Higher Education. I also would recommend the US News World Report rankings. That's the one that matters certainly the most in the US, and I think in many regions around the world. And they do have a lot more specific rankings as well. So they've got the National Universities ranking, which is the one that people pay the most attention to. They also have one for liberal arts. They also have subject-specific ones, like the ones I've mentioned for engineering, computer science, et cetera. And those are very helpful. Now, for findings here for Times Higher Education, I guess worth mentioning that the top 20 does not feature any Australian schools. We've got 70% US schools, 30% or so UK schools. But if we're not to trust rankings implicitly, well, what are we to trust? There are a lot of other factors that we would consider. Here are some. So career opportunities. When you're thinking about a university, I think that from my experience, parents want their kid to be set up for security. They want them to have a good experience. And they want them to be set up for security so that they feel like they can let go and just enjoy their kid enjoying their life, both in university and beyond, without having to worry about where they'll end up. And so there are a lot of ways to really cross-section and analyze that when you're picking out a school list, depending, of course, on what you want to go into, right? Now, it might be a hard time, 2025, almost 2026, to think about what you want to go into. There's AI, there's disruptions, there's a lot of things that make it kind of hard to pick, but if you do have a set path in mind, there are definitely some schools that are very specialized. So MIT, Caltech, and Stanford, of course, are techie, and they're often very close to a place like Silicon Valley. Stanford and Caltech built Silicon Valley. There would be no Silicon Valley if it weren't for Stanford and Caltech. If we're looking at like what Google has just done with quantum computing, just ridiculous advancements being made. That's being done in Stanford laboratories. That's being done right next to Stanford laboratories. If you want to be at the cutting edge of these kinds of things, you're going to want to go to the US, and you're probably going to want to go to a place like Silicon Valley. And there are places like Stanford, there are also places like Santa Clara that are less competitive, that are still in that world, or like Purdue or Georgia Tech or University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, where recruiters will go to find the next people who will be at the cutting edge in those labs, et cetera, because they've got the infrastructure for going to those places and recruiting those students already. Same thing goes for business. Same thing goes for consulting. Certainly business schools like Wharton at Penn, certainly places like NYU, Stern, if you want to be in Wall Street or in that kind of finance world as well. And then there are more specific programs like Cornell's hospitality program is very famous. Northwestern journalism program, best in the world. UChicago economics. I love Wikipedia so much. Look up UChicago economics. Look up the Chicago School of Economics. It's a whole historical thread of the 20th century about how UChicago economists sort of influenced the development of 20th century economics. So there's a lot of lore to these particular subjects, these particular universities. It goes on. And so, of course, if you want to be in LA or New York, UCLA, NYU, USC are great options for media, for entertainment. UMich, UT Austin, Georgia Tech. Yeah, automotive. We've got an amazing, if you look up Ford Robotics Center, paid for by Ford, the automobile company. So cool. I actually just once stumbled into, I was kind of trespassing around Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I came across this like beyond a hill, sort of hidden from public view, this weird fake city with a bunch of self-driving cars. This was like 10 years ago. This was before self-driving cars were such a big thing. It was called M-City, if you look up M-City. And they were pioneering self-driving cars. And just in my backyard, I didn't know about it. So, there's a lot of that kind of stuff happening as well. Columbia, amazing for certainly IR, public policy. Johns Hopkins, very famous for pre-med and healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. It goes on, it goes on. Alumni. So I mentioned the feedback loop. If you are going to Harvard, well, partially you're going to Harvard because that really smart people, successful people went to Harvard, right? And so they want people who will continue that streak. If we don't get any more notable alumni for the next 50 years from Harvard, then they'll be upset. They want you to someday become a notable alumni, right? And that'll help them also get money. They'll ask you for money afterwards. And because there's such a culture of identifying with your school in the US, I see University of Michigan logos everywhere I go. Fake. I see fake logos, like in some street markets here in Taipei, off license, because people, it's a brand at that point, and because people have such attachment to that experience, people will want to connect with that alumni. It's not just 4 years, it's the rest of your life. That's really what you get with American universities. Who else do we got? UMich, Madonna. I'm not so proud of Madonna here. We've got others, certainly beyond Madonna. I mentioned Larry Ellison connection, Larry Page, like two of the richest men in the world. That helps us out sometimes. As far as donations go, we've also got James Earl Jones, voice of Star Wars. We've got Gerald Ford. We've got a U.S. president, actually. He was on the football team. He was the starting center. But it goes on. And some of them actually teach there, which I guess we'll hear about in a second as well. Matthew McConaughey, he not only went to UT Austin, he teaches at UT Austin. You can take a course with Matthew McConaughey if you're into that kind of thing. Okay, and then we've got some specialized programs, sort of building on what I was discussing before about the career-specific support that you'll get. I've got a student she was coming from New Zealand. She ended up at a program, Penn has a lot of these kinds of programs, that was combining biology and business. So it was combining Wharton, top business school in the world, with the incredible biology opportunities that you'll get at a place like Penn as well. And that is super selective. There's only like a couple dozen people every year, but they're super tight-knit now, So these programs are not only going to set you apart as far as the rest of your employers go for the rest of your life, but it'll also put you in a kind of smaller circle that'll help with the networking side of American universities, which is so much a part of the experience. You'll see that as well with usually taking the best of what a school has to offer. So for instance, at Caltech, you can do undergraduate research at NASA or doing the kind of techie stuff that they're so famous for. MIT, it's sort of using their tech side to apply that in the media world in kind of creative design-based research as well, which is quite interesting. And it goes on as well with some kind of creative programs. I mentioned professors as well. Of course, we've got Matthew McConaughey at UT Austin. There's a picture that I like of a bunch of students standing outside of a lecture hall in line to talk to Obama. And this is not because he was Obama. This is because he was their professor. He was a professor at UChicago right up until he was senator, as a U.S. senator. So that's often how you'll get it. Either you'll have someone who's really, really kind of top already, and then they go on to do something notable, or they come back and they're kind of like a celebrity professor. I can't believe they put Steven Pinker here. My mom used to work with Steven Pinker. He's like a developmental psychologist. It's funny that I'm not going to get into her beef with Steven Pinker. But people who you've seen in pop psychology, pop everything, they're going to be not only writing these books and putting them out in bookstores around the world, but then as an undergrad, you have the chance and the responsibility to talk with them, to ask questions after class. That's part of the US like faculty student experience that's just culturally very, very different than anywhere else in the world. And the facilities as well. So I mentioned again, some of the stuff that, say, Google is doing on quantum, and how that stems directly from work that Stanford and MIT did in, say, creating the internet some decades ago. These developments, that's why they're, so essential to American power generally, have been the forefront of these scientific developments, both of their time and of our time today. So you've got the Stanford Linear Accelerator Center and the Jet Propulsion Lab at Caltech. And you've also got just some kind of fun, almost like lore at some of these, like the Beneke Rare Book and Manuscript Library. There's a bit of lore there where it's like, oh, if something happened, if there was a fire, they would like remove the oxygen from the library, which would somehow stop the fire and protect the books, although it would be fatal to everyone who was in the library. But that's just like something that you have to sign a waiver for if you're going to be doing late night work in Yale. So, there's like tradition. They really care about these facilities as well. They're very much tied up in the ethos and the narrative of these universities. Yeah, so I hope that was helpful for people. I see we've got a couple questions in the Q&A. Please feel free to keep it going, and I will hand off to Kiri.
So excited to speak to you all about case studies so that you can get a real feel. And I know we have a question in the Q&A about should I be studying a year ahead of the curriculum for someone who is obviously wanting to be very competitive for this journey?
Oh, yeah. Do you want to speak to that now? Or I could take it
no,
up?
I think, bless you. You're so funny. I think if you want to, or we could go, I think what we'll do is we'll go through the case study, only because I feel like it might give them some ideas in relation to how to create the profile. And I know that some of you get worried about what that's going to look like, right? And how are you going to impact your applications in a competitive way? So I might go on to just the next slide. And so here we are. So this is a highly competitive SAT. You've got a 1590 out of 1600, almost a perfect score. This is one of our students that was fortunate enough to obtain admission at UPenn and Columbia. 99.908 are ducks in year 11, second place in year 12 of a one of Sydney's top schools, which I know I'd say the top 20 schools, HSC curriculum, plus some APs to earn that university credit in the US, psychology and English Lit AP, both perfect scores of 5. Crimson supported her biology research. Paper was published with a literature review. So we pair you up with professors and PhDs to be able to work in teams on a certain piece of literature. So interests were philosophy, English, economics, very humanities focused, which is wonderful. And each of you is going to be different. Each of you is going to have your own area of interest and theology, history. So so honours and extracurriculars, first part prize in the John Locke essay. So we have competition classes for this kind of thing. Second place in the National Model United Nations, National High School Mooting, clearly a strong debater, Cadets Corps as well, Colour Sergeant and Company Commander, School Service Learning Club. You can see the list, Executive Monitor of Academics, an esteemed elder in the King's School Philosophical Societies. There you go. Schools given away. International Ethics Olympiad, Project Eastwood founder, and also volleyball captain. So very well-rounded student. And not everyone needs to be entirely this well-rounded. I know some of you might be looking at this going, I'm not good at sport. It's okay. So this is your admissions timeline, year 7 to 9, really building that candidacy, learning your soft skills, really getting the time management down pat on your assessments and your exams, academic strategy, courses, subject selections, building an ECL profile or having a profile sort of laid out of what it is that you're wanting to complete before the end. that. And just having a timeline. So 11 and 12, it's more your exploration of the interests and doing relevant activities, taking either your A levels or getting really ready to do a couple of subjects early. I know a lot of you know what I mean because you're probably doing that right now. Building your ECL projects, attempting those national, international competitions. But how are you going to do that if you don't have any context, right? So it's more about preparing you for that. Year 12 and early year 12 application preparation. Yes, start to prepare your application early in year 12. Begin that application so you're not cramming letters of reference. Obtain leadership roles. I know that happens the year before, everyone. We know this. Year 12, June to December, essays, drafting. And we go into so much detail. Noah knows this so well. We go into so much detail on drafting and redrafting and really making sure that we're supporting our students to the absolute optimal on those essays, and making them unique to you so that you do stand out. Compile achievements and app information. Final UK aptitude tests. Hopefully we've done our SATs. We don't have to worry, but we may need to. Interviews, getting ready for interviews, December to March. And what we've done so well last year, we tripled our early admits. Do you know that, people? We tripled them. That's incredible. So situational work on deferral and waitlist strategies, hopefully early admits. August, September, first semester, year after. Pack your bags, go to college, go and meet your people. Year 12 admissions timeline, and this is showing you those early applications. Varies by college from November the 1st to November the 3rd. Applying with a predicted ATAR or IB score. Oxbridge UK Med, October the 15th, hard deadline. Applying with a predicted ATAR or IB scores. US regular decision, January 1st to halfway through January, applying with your actual ATAR and IB scores and your additional qualifications. UK regular decision, January the 15th, again. Essays, finalising drafting, we would be wanting to do this much earlier. Compile achievements, app information, final UK aptitude tests for some of you. Interviews, free time, January to July, work, travel, have fun. Start either at Australian unis while you're waiting for your results or relax or do something exciting. College start August to September. Pack your bags, get to college, meet your people. So how can we help? How can Crimson help? We do so much here at Crimson. Every day we put so much effort into each one of you and put a dedicated team around you. Our core support, academic support, standardized test prep, SAT, major entrance exams from the UCAT, all aptitude tests, even European entrance, UK, UCAT, BMAT, LNAT, SAT, MATS, postgrad even. CGA, we have our own registered academy. So we actually do AP courses. We're the only official, as far as I'm aware, and I'm fairly certain this is true, we do support for your advanced placement exams in a school type setting. You have teachers teaching you this after school or on the weekends, obviously. And we also do full-time CGA A levels and APs as well. So there you go. We own Revision Village for IB. So we are able to provide you with the best possible support to get 7s in the IB and in exam prep. Extracurricular support, capstone projects to make it unique and for you to develop something impactful and that is truly you. Indigo, we do research, which we then publish. Crimson Honours, preparation with panels for international competitions. We have like 4 classes per competition. Delta Careers, internships with one of the top most amazing top companies, Uber, HSBC, Lunar Rover. We used to have Lunar Rover, people. Competitive summer program. We have application support, detailed application support for some of the top, the world's best summer programs. Support with art portfolios. And I have one student applying for production management or production engineering in the UK, who will be doing a very unique project, architecture even. We have help on portfolios for all sorts of things. Application strategy, admissions consulting for the US, we go into a lot of detail. UK, again, we have a specialized team. Canada, Australia, Europe, Asia, undergrad, postgrad, we have med specialists, athletic recruitment support. Our head of ATHS, we have got rowing. I'm a rowing parent. I don't know if you can sort of tell, but yeah, I am. Wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and get down there and go. We have tennis. We have got Coco Gauff's old sparring partner is actually one of our strategists. We've got a range of experts. Soccer, I have many students. Some of my students have full ride scholarships for sports. Application reviews by former AO officers, and committee type support. These are some of our most amazing colleagues. We will probably both smile because we know some of these individuals and they are very dedicated to the cause to help you get into your goal university, be that the Ivy League, Stanford, MIT, Oxford, Cambridge, or any of the other top universities. They have first-hand experience of what it takes to gain admission at these universities. And now we're going to go to your book, your consult. The consult is actually free, people. So it's actually your opportunity to tell us more about yourself. And it's our way of showing you how we can get you across the line and show you what a Crimson support system and program really looks like. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to launch a poll, which means which will allow you the opportunity to connect with an admissions advisor such as myself or one of our amazing team here. And we very much look forward to meeting you and putting together a dedicated plan for you. So now we're going to move to the exciting Q&A section. Now I know that we have
I think two.
Hannah.
Yeah,
We've got a couple. We've got a couple of questions. So considering the difference in timing between the US and Australian school year, is it fair to say Australian students have both year 11 and 12 to develop their extracurricular list?
tough. So as far as the timing goes, there is definitely a phenomenon in which they're going to be viewing you as an Australian applicant and comparing you to Australian applicants. So I think that that's always worth remembering. When you are going to be considered, you will be considered in the kind of pool or in the context of other Australian applicants, and they'll understand how that timing works. They'll also understand that you may be more restricted at an Australian secondary school in the extracurriculars that you're able to get involved with. And that might look differently as an underclassman in younger years versus an upperclassman as well. So what's most important there is just remembering that you will be judged in the context of your peers, and you'll be judged in the context of your peers at your school as well. So say your counselor writes a letter for some other student who's applying to the US and says, hey, this student, there weren't a lot of opportunities for extracurriculars because this is how our system works, but they took every advantage and they actually pushed me to consider ways that they could get more involved and support the school in ways that we didn't even consider possible. And then they don't say anything about you. Then they're not going to be very happy with your extracurricular involvement in your extracurricular profile. So that context and that letter from the counselor is very important. Right, I think we've got another couple.
We do. How would you support someone wanting to follow a performing arts pathway, which is quite a different path?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have people on the team who have a lot of experience in these specialized programs because, as you say, they are very different paths. For instance, I was just getting lunch with someone in Korea who has just finished up her architecture dissertation, and so she supports a
Oh,
lot of students who are applying to architecture schools in particular. But we also have someone who studied dance and is particularly attuned to that side of thing. We have Dylan Ricci, of course, with film. We have
oh,
Anson Tan. We've got people who are more experienced with music school applications in particular. And a lot of that then comes down to understanding how the portfolio can be improved and can be evaluated, because that'll be the bulk of how those kinds of submissions are considered, and how it can sort of complemented by the rest of the application. You know, the grades will matter, but they won't matter in the same way. The extracurriculars will matter, but they won't matter in the same way. It's more about like, okay, how did this contribute to the performing arts that we see? And so you're still telling stories, but you're telling different stories, and the portfolio matters much more. And so we do have specialists for that, both as strategists and portfolio mentors.
last one. Should I be
Mhm.
studying ahead of the curricula to get good grades and a good ATAR?
I'm not sure I fully understand what we mean by studying
Yeah,
ahead
I
of the
was thinking,
curricula.
Candy, are you going for med? If it's like, it depends. What is it that you're wanting to achieve? Which course are you wanting to get into? And also, I feel that whilst, and I've seen many students do this because I have seen a lot of med students as well, I
Mm,
feel when you're studying ahead of the curricula, right, you're not focusing on what you're doing at that time. And I think as you go into your senior years, it's more about doing the best job on each piece that you're doing at that point. There is an element, oh, you don't really know what you want to do
she's in
yet.
year seven.
Bless
Well,
her.
great for showing up at year
That's
seven.
such a sweet. What a sweetie. She actually, it came up. Candy. Oh, do you know what, Candy? I feel like it would be so lovely to for you. I think you keep coming along to these, Candy. I feel like you will work out what it is that you do want to do. We very much look forward to meeting you as well. I think that just work well on what you know you're passionate about. If you're really good at something and you feel like you can push the boat out and move forward, then do so. But definitely don't get too wrapped up in just wanting to stay ahead of the academics. Yeah, 100%.
I've
I love
posted,
that.
yeah, explore by doing, because it's a thread that you have to balance a little bit, right? You want to be thoughtful in the things that you are doing, and you don't want to just sit around thinking as well. You want to be active and join every, like you're in year seven. In a couple of years, year nine, you might have some opportunities to join the first meeting of different clubs, Candy. And if you don't like it, you just don't have to go back. You know, you can join every first meeting and then not go back to the ones that you don't want to go to. But it's that first step that'll really give you the momentum. At your age, obviously, you've already got some momentum showing up to something like this at year seven and asking questions, but there are ways to keep that going.
It's wonderful. Oh, bless her. You're welcome, Candy. Awesome. We very much liked seeing you all here today. We very much look forward to seeing you again. Don't forget to book a consultation on the poll if you are interested in finding out more about how we can help you. It's totally free. But lovely to see you all here today, and we'll see you again at next time.
Cheers. Thank you so much, all. Great to meet you. Great to see you.